Tonight, a slew of new developments in the Russia probe. Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen, the Mueller report itself. We've got details on all of that, and a former federal prosecutor joins us to hash it all out. Then, Justice Mueller and his legal team, they're aggressively fighting the charges against the actor, even with all the evidence against him. He's accused of making an attack on himself in order to make more money. We've got the fallout, reaction, and more. And we've also got some sports here and the movies. Chris Connolly of ABC News, he's on the red carpet with us for a preview and predictions for Sunday's Oscars. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks for joining us. Now, as we've been telling you for the past few days, there are reports saying that the Mueller report could be finished as early as next week. But a Justice Department official now saying to basically slow the roll here. Time will tell. There is, of course, rampant speculation about what the report will in fact contain and also what the American public at the end will wind up seeing. Now, former Trump aide Sam Nunberg, he had this to say about it.
I can't imagine that the special counsel is not going to release something that shows a roadmap for the House to investigate a conspiracy to answer it as a political question.
Impeachment, you mean?
Correct, for articles of impeachment.
Take that for what it's worth. But nobody knows for sure exactly what it will contain and whether we, the people, will get to see it, especially in its unvarnished form. Also, Paul Manafort's legal troubles, they're not going away, they're adding up. The Times reporting New York prosecutors, they're preparing state charges against Donald Trump's former campaign chairman. Paper saying that a grand jury has been reviewing evidence of possible financial crimes. Now, this is significant because this would totally separate from any federal charges and would not be subject to presidential pardon if, in fact, Manafort is convicted. So a lot to unpack here, and let's bring in our next guest, one of our favorites, former federal prosecutor Joseph Moreno. He served in the Justice Department's National Security Division. All right, Joseph, I want to get to the Mueller report, but first, let me get to some of the ancillary players, and I start off here, obviously, with Manafort. Talk about making the wrong kind of enemies here when he basically broke his plea agreement deal. Now they're going to the state, and there's no get-out-of-jail-free card for Manafort, it looks like, especially if they're successful in New York, correct?
Hi, Richard, and that's absolutely correct. So even if, and that's a big if, Paul Manafort were to someday receive a presidential pardon which covers federal crimes, that has no impact on any civil or criminal charges that can be brought by either the New York Attorney General's office, which has some pretty expansive powers, or the Manhattan District Attorney's office, which is also a very aggressive, very capable office. You know, we think of federal prosecutors as sort of the gold standard, and they are, but states and localities have a lot of power to bring a lot of different kinds of charges against individuals, particularly in New York. So there's absolutely no chance that a pardon means that Paul Manafort gets a get-out-of-jail-free card forever.
Who's this David Giovannis guy? I know he's a Moscow-based American businessman, but apparently long-standing ties to Trump. Why now are we hearing his name, and why possibly could he be important?
So it's another Russian businessman, and it's actually not a name that I have been familiar with up until very recently, and I thought we heard of a different, variety of cast of characters here, but this is a new one. It's a reportedly long-standing relationship with President Trump, and possibly could give some insights into both general Trump organization business dealings in Russia that could go back decades, as has been reported, but more importantly, it probably goes to the Moscow project. And remember, again, that's that potential Trump Tower condominium project that was reportedly on and off with respect to discussions and negotiations. And whenever you do business in a country like Russia, there's no doubt the government is going to be involved. And that's something that we're not really familiar with here in the United States. So assuming that these conversations were still happening and the Russian government was somehow involved, the fact that they were happening well into 2016, which is into the primaries and getting really close to the 2016 presidential election, that's the issue here. And the fact that we have not gotten a straight answer as to how far these talks went, how long into the year they went, and we've gotten, in fact, not a straight answer, but we've gotten conflicting answers about that.
Let's come back to Michael Cohen. I'm going to make a supposition. You tell me if I'm wrong here, but I'm assuming at this stage of the game, before the Mueller report has dropped, for him to be a witness, there had to be blessing from Mueller and team that he could speak. How does it work, Joseph, in terms of the coordination of the kind of question or focus that he'll have to, basically answer to. We already know Lanny Davis says, oh, he's got some salacious and titillating stories to talk about from the president, from, maybe some of the shady dealings, let alone colorful, if not racist language. At least that's the hinting we're getting from Lanny Davis. Does Mueller say, do basically whatever you want, House, or I'm going to be staying in these lanes. You guys can go over there, and it might actually be supplemental to my probe because that's not what I was tasked to do. How do they work together, or if at all?
Now, the House could ask virtually any question they want of Michael Cohen. Now, odds are they will respect the wishes of the special counsel because he will say, look, there's an ongoing investigation. This individual is still cooperating. Things he could say to Congress could implicate what I'm still investigating. So I'm going to ask you to please respect A, B, and C and stay away from these areas. You want to go to D, E, and F? By all means, go for it. But please respect what I'm doing here. And then Congress ultimately will decide whether to respect those requests. Now, I have to think that they will, because there's so much stake in the importance of the Mueller investigation that nobody wants to be accused of sort of doing anything to interfere with it, even if that interference is, a search for the truth.
Now, I know, Joe, one of the principal questions everybody's asking with the Mueller report is, when's this thing going to drop? I'm more interested in what you think the form of this report is. We bring up a graphic now about 7 different possibilities that it could go down. But the prevailing wisdom I hear, and tell me if you agree with it, is he's going to lay out a roadmap that will lead to a political choice as to whether or not to pursue articles of impeachment or not. What do you think Mueller does? What was, if you follow history, what's his MO? And given all the expectations of this, what in the end of the day, when we see it, assuming we do, what will it look like?
So Mueller's MO is a just the facts, ma'am, play by the rules, stickler for protocol kind of prosecutor. So I have no reason to think he's going to deviate from that model that has been a tried and true way for him for decades as a public servant. So I think he's going to stick to the facts and stick to what the regulations require. So now I do not expect a sort of 1,000-page footnoted illustrative report like the ones we've seen from Ken Starr years ago. That was very different. Ken Starr reported to Congress, and so therefore the product he was generating was for congressional digestion to see if impeachment should be pursued. That's not what Bob Mueller is doing. He is looking at criminal charges. And since, as we know, DOJ policy is that the president cannot be indicted while in office, I think Bob Mueller will probably steer clear of the president in weighing in one way or the other in whether he should be indicted or not. He will lay out facts. So when it comes to those facts, you're right. Congress will then have to take that document, whether it's a slim summary or an extended, illustrative kind of report, and decide what to do with it as a political question.
Joseph, is he limited to a lane he basically has to stay in given the parameters of the probe? Or if he came across illegality, especially if we assume he has seen the tax returns of Trump and he's seen some of the business practices that he's been engaged in for decades, if he came across something that is neither obstruction or collusion but yet illegality, does that make its way into the report?
So it could, right? He is certainly not limited. Mueller's objective was to look for coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, as well as any other criminal activities that he finds along the way. So it's his decision whether to keep this investigation going if he finds things completely unrelated to that Russia coordination component of what he's looking at, or obstruction of justice for that matter. He can pursue that for as long as it takes, or he can refer that to other components within the Justice Department. And we've seen some of that, particularly with Michael Cohen, where it's been referred to the Southern District of New York. So really, that's Bob Mueller's decision, whether or not those extraneous cases, whether it involves the president or the president's families or something completely unrelated, makes it into his report, or if he says, you know what, I'm going to stay narrow, here's my report on collusion or obstruction of justice, these other things can be handled by other prosecutors and they can do what they wish with it.
Finally, for me, I heard an interesting line, self-incrimination and this president. How much do you think, when this is said and done, it won't just be forensic investigations, but a lot of the leads will have been generated by the president himself, by what he said, meetings he's taken, lies he's told? How much will he, when this report's finished, look at himself and say, I did that to myself?
I think a lot. So, I mean, look at the James Comey firing, right? The president, as we've gone over, can fire an FBI director for any reason he wants, even no reason at all, as long as it's not a corrupt reason, right? Had President Trump simply said, you know what, I wasn't happy with James Comey, I fired him, that was my decision, and never spoke of it again, there'd be virtually no obstruction of justice case to pursue with regard to James Comey. The reason they're pursuing it and continue to pursue it is because of the president's comment to Lester Holt on NBC, where he says it was because of the Russia thing. And then his comments to Russian nationals in the White House saying, I got rid of James Comey because of Russia. So you have to imagine that this whole entire investigation component stems from the president's own words. And there's other instances where there's tweets and other public statements that also triggered the same kind of scrutiny. So I think at the end of the day, the president feels his best offense are his words, but he's also going to realize they're a significant weakness that exposed him to a lot of potential legal problems.
Well, we shall see. It doesn't sound like next week we're going to get this thing, but it can't be that much longer, although I've been saying that for 6 months. Joseph Moreno, I appreciate the time so much. Thank you.
Certainly, Richard. Happy to do it.
All right, let's forget about Trump. Let's be honest. The case that we've really been talking about over the water cooler this week, Jussie Smollett, the Empire actor, unapologetic, and his legal team going after the Chicago PD. We've got new details and also new reactions to this truly bizarre story.